troops transportation management. Okay, we're going to cover the end-to-end process for troops transportation management throughout the week, which is mainly Wednesday, Thursday, and today. Wednesday, Thursday, we saw the end-to-end process for UN-owned equipment. On Thursday, we took a look at contingency-owned equipment and how we would use the load list to create the proper documents in TM, and then we would manage our transportation freight orders that were either generated automatically by the system or we did so manually. We also learned how to submit events both in TM and CCP and how both systems would talk to each other. We learned a bit about the documents that are generated in both SRM, ECC, and TM and how they all are linked to each other in the three systems. And today we're basically going to go through a review of all that, especially in TM, and how we are supposed to create forwarding orders directly from the Excel sheet or load list that we use to create these documents for troops. Okay, so the first thing we can do here is I wanted to show you the end-to-end process flow completely. So I'm going to go directly to the last slide on my presentation here and just share this as well. Okay, so basically this is what we're going to be reviewing today. And we have a couple more slides here, animations. Let me just make sure they're all there and we can take a look at it all together. Okay, so finally this is the complete version. So basically, just go over it once again. I'm just using a highlighter. Okay, so in this stage here it says COE. In this case, we're looking at troops, so let's keep that in mind. Okay, today we're only going to be following the process for troops, for uploading the load list for troops. Basically for either COE scenarios or LOA or non-LOA scenarios. The COE is confusing me up here. But where the process is exactly the same, whether we're doing it for contingency on equipment or troops, it's exactly the same. We're first going to be starting with a load list or an Excel sheet that we're going to be populating offline. And basically with that Excel sheet, we will upload that to TM, which will automatically generate what we know as a forwarding order. And we'll take a look at that in the system. This is done automatically by the Umoja system. And as well as the freight unit. Okay, these two documents just generated automatically after we have successfully uploaded our load list with all the data and information related to the troops. Okay, we're going to take a in-depth look at what this Excel looks like. That's the first thing we're going to be doing in the WebEx session. And then go through TM to view these documents that are generated. Then we'll move on to the next page, which is to plan. We're going to see the planning and how it happens for both LOA scenarios and non-LOA scenarios. As we saw yesterday, the LOA scenario would be equivalent to using a DAP Incoterm, and the non-LOA would be the equivalent to the XWorks Incoterm. And basically, we learned that in an LOA scenario, the system does all the work for us. So the Umoja system will create the freight orders automatically, and we'll assign the carriers to the freight orders automatically as well. Now, if we're talking about a non-LOA scenario, which would be an XWorks scenario, we would have to do some things manually. So basically, we would have to select the freight units that were generated here in this section here when we uploaded the load list. And once we select them in the TM Cockpit, the Umoja will generate some proposals. We would select the best proposal depending on if we're looking at distance, cost, a time frame, or even means of transportation. The system will calculate the estimated charges based on the master data in the system and create the freight orders that are going to be linked to this freight unit. Automatically, the SOW, statement of work, will be generated as well in the system, and I'll show you guys how to go looking for that. Those of you who were in yesterday's session and the one before yesterday already know how to look for that. Also, for the non-LOA scenarios, this stage for procurement freight, the one before last, we won't be looking at how to create these shopping carts for freight because that would just take the majority of our session. And the same thing goes for approving the PO or creating it, but we are going to, again, we assign carriers, freight POs, to freight orders, and how we can edit charges, okay, dates, charges, and freight orders. And last but not least, we'll also go through a brief review of the updating of events for LOA scenarios and non-LOA scenarios, both in CCP and in TM, as we see here. So this is basically going to be the most that we're going to see from our PowerPoint presentation, as I rather just go directly into the system and get hands-on with the Excel and systems like SRM and TM. I think the mind map is quite clear, and we'll be going back and forth with this so we know where we are. So let me just exit this presentation mode. All right, and let's take a look at that Excel that I was talking about. So in this case, and this will be the first Excel that I'm going to share with you guys. There's at least 2 of them. Let's go with the first. Okay, so this is what the Excel looks like. If you are familiar with it, then better for you. If not, we're going to go through each one of these tabs, so bear with me if you're quite familiar with this one. Now, we just have to be aware that there are 2 different Excels, depending on the type of, let's say, movement type that we're going to use this Excel for. So if this is a deployment of troops, which in this case, if we can see here, ZDE, with movement type ZDE stands for deployment, we're going to be using one of these Excels. And then we have the other Excel, which we have over here. So let me put it on half of the screen here so we can see how they both change. So we see the movement type on this side for ZDE for deployment. We can also use this one for repatriation as well, which would be ZRE, okay, the one that I have behind. And then the last would be the movement type ZRO for rotation. Okay, we're going to leave that Excel on the side for a second here, but I just wanted to show you that we have at least 2 Excels, so one for ZDE and one for ZRE, which would be for repatriation. Okay, and this is the one Excel we would use. Now let's take a look at the cells in this Excel and how they feed from the data that's in this same Excel. If you take a look at the bottom, we have first this one tab called Troops Forwarding Upload, which is the one we're looking at right now. We also have the Reference Location tab. If we click on it, we can see that this is basically just exactly that, a reference of locations, so data related to locations. So we have our cities in the column on the left, and then right next to it, what would be the characters or master data characters that reference this city in the actual Excel. So whenever we select one of these locations, that'll make reference to the city right next to it. And these will automatically be populated in the other part of the Excel in the first tab, which is this one here, and we'll see how that works. And then the last tab to the right, the Reference Troops Contributing Country, works the same way. So we have a list of master data all the way to the left. Now, I'm sure that these Excels are probably still being updated. I remember when we first delivered the training in New York, they were being updated almost daily. But basically, the way they're going to work will be like this. We'll have tabs with master data that is directly going to be taken from the first tab where we're going to be adding our information. So we have here Afghanistan and the BP numbers. So these BP numbers are directly linked to the name of the troops contributing country to the left. And these numbers, we'll see, that represent the BP numbers will be in our Excel here. So if I scroll all the way to the right, we'll see that we have our member country or shipper here and the troops contributing country name here. Okay, so information that comes directly from that last tab to the right. And then we also have the reference location, which is linked to the source location and destination locations that we have here. Source city and destination city as well. Okay, so this information from source city and destination city taken directly from the reference locations. And then all the way at the end, we'll have the same thing for the troops contributing country and even mission that we see here on the side. Okay, so anything that is pretty much written in red will be data that is taken from the two tabs on the sides here. Okay, every other piece of information we see from this Excel we can manually add to the Excel. So let's say that if source, city, source location, destination, city, and destination location are populated based on the tabs, that means that our pickup from and to date we have to add manually. If we just change the first one, that will automatically change all the others. So if I just go and change the date here and click on enter, that'll change the rest of the list. And that same thing works for the delivery date. Now the product, this column should remain untouched. If anything, we can just copy and paste it if we want to add a next, let's say, row of now repatriation, and change some dates, because remember the movement type here from top to bottom is for deployment. We also have the weight, volume, and quantity that we can add as well, and the tour of date, which is right here, which indicates the amount of months that these troops have been out. In this case would be 12, or the amount of time that they have been out, or the amount of time that they will be out, okay, depending on if they're coming or going. The forwarding group. Now this column is important to review because basically the numbers that we reflect here, if you see for the first batch for ZDE movement types, we have a number 1. If we were starting another batch, whether it was for ZRE or ZDE, we would have to add a new number. So in this case would be 2. And the same thing would happen for every other batch of, let's say, troops that we're going to make travel, because this is the column that will create in TM different forwarding orders, different documents. So in this case, it would be like the equivalent of a purchase order that has 3 different inbound delivery documents linked to it. In this case, we could have all the information in one Excel, but depending on the numbers that we add here in the forwarding group, that would generate a number of documents. But we do have to add these numbers here. Now, since I don't want to add more than one, I'm just going to delete these 2 here. And if we move all the way to the right at the end here, we have the base BTD reference, which is the MOU. The Incoterm, which we'll also have to add here. In this case, it's XWorks Incoterm. You can also change that for DAP. And then troops contributing country, member country, and mission are all taken from the reference tab here. Same thing for the receiving plant consignee. So that's basically just how the information works here for the Excel for troops. If you take a look at the products, we have the chalks. Okay, so the number of chalks means the number of flights. So in this case, we should have 2 flights, and number of troops at the bottom 200. So I guess we're packing 100 in each. And the cargo baggage, cabin baggage. And these are quite easy to understand. The positioning flight, and outbound flight, inbound flight, and positioning flight. Now these may be a little more complex to understand, but I'm sure for you guys it's quite easy. Okay, so it's the incoming flight, outgoing flight, and then the depositioning flight is what we would make reference to when talking about if we do not have a flight available and we would have to have someone, let's say, place an airplane there for our troops to travel. We would have to put that into consideration in our Excel as well. The flight coming to pick up the troops, and then the flight going back to its origin position. I hope that was a simple enough explanation. Now I'm going to keep checking the chat since I'm running this WebEx alone here. I'm going to check the chat every once in a while. And I see that we do have here, do we as procurement ever see this spreadsheet? Okay. So in this case, unless you have the, this spreadsheet is usually not for procurement freight. Okay, so in this case, I just explained it because it's part of the WebEx series. When I was told to deliver this training, I knew that it was for the procurement freight team, and I know that that for you guys would mean that the only aspect of this training which would be, that would concern you basically would be this one here related to procurement freight, so this column basically. But of course, having an understanding of how the planning would work is important for you, just as well as the submission of events. I just wanted to show you quickly this Excel so that you would understand how this system works. So we're done with the explanation of the Excel. We're not going to spend much more time on that. All right. Okay, perfect. I would simply click on this button here, that we have the airplane and the boat on, and this would generate an Excel and a text document that's what I'm going to be uploading to TM. Okay, so that basically covers the Excel sheet. Now this would be the equivalent to raising a shopping cart, but in this case for troops we're filling in this Excel. Okay, let's move on now to going directly into the system here for TM. So I'm going to log in to Moja here. Okay, and again, I'm logging into the training environment, so I may have to go through several clicks that you won't have to go through in production. All right. So basically, the Excels for contingency on the equipment or troops are basically for MoveCon to either review or update. So you guys wouldn't be directly involved or, let's say, impacted by it. Okay. So the way this would work is once we log into TM, which is loading now, TM would look like this. Basically, now let me see if I can zoom in a bit more so it's clear. Okay. We'd have our three basic tabs at the top for forwarding order management, freight order management, and planning. To upload this Excel sheet, we would go to the forwarding order management and click on the mass upload forwarding order hyperlink. To search for, let's say, if we were searching for one of the documents that has already been uploaded, but we can't remember which number it was, sort of like if we're going into SRM or ECC to look for a PO or a shopping cart, we would go to the overview forwarding order link here. So I'm just going to go quickly through the three tabs. The next one, freight order management, would work just the same as the one we saw for the overview of forwarding orders here, but in this case what we're only looking for are the freight orders, which is the last step in the process. Okay, the freight orders would represent each and every leg in our transportation proposal. So every time we would have to stop somewhere or change the means of transportation from either a truck to an airplane or so on, that would represent our freight orders. Okay, so they would be our legs in our travel. And planning, if we take a look at this transportation cockpit hyperlink, this is where we would go to see which freight units, especially the ones with scenario non-LOA, would need to be managed manually. Okay, the freight orders would need to be managed manually. So I'm going quickly through this because I won't have enough time through the hour and a half to go through everything. Again, there's going to be an assessment for this three-part course. Now I understand, especially I think it's you, Sarah, and I see more people have joined the session. Hi, Maxime. Ramona, you three haven't been in the past sessions, so of course this is going to be all the information that we've been seeing on Wednesday and Thursday, but just in one quick session. There's an assessment that's going to be involving all parts. Okay, it's going to be involving what we saw on Wednesday, what we saw on Thursday, but I think with what we see today, it will cover enough to at least be able to pass that assessment. All right, so let's go directly to the uploading hyperlink here. And the way this would work, just like it looks in ECC, we can execute in the foreground, and we would select from the matchbox the actual text file that we would have to upload to generate our documents in TM. All right, so we have here to allow access and select. Now I would just have to select wherever it is that I have my actual documents here. So just bear with me 1 second while I find them. They're quite hidden since they've removed one of our direct access folders. So for troops, we see here these are the Excels that we would be using for troops, and then the documents that these generate. So we'd be selecting one, for example here, the text document. Make sure it's selected here before we click on choose, and once that's done, it's as easy as clicking on execute, and that would generate our document called forwarding order number. Now, for contingency on equipment, just as well as for troops, we have what is called the forwarding order number that is generated in TM. For the ones for UN-owned equipment, the document is called a DTR. All right, but they're exactly the same thing. They're these documents generated in TM that we're going to be using to manage transportation. Okay, so in this case, forwarding order for troops and contingency-owned equipment, and DTR for UN-owned equipment. The lights are all green, so that means there are no issues in this upload. If we did have any, they would show as red. All the information we see here is the one that has been added in the Excel. If we had any errors, they would show in red, and we just have to click on the I icon here to read the message. So we do have already our forwarding order number generated. Let's go back to our tab here, Forwarding Order Management, and we overview our forwarding orders. So this will look a lot like SRM if you're familiar with it. These fields are practically identical to what we see in SRM. Basically, we have the fields that we can use to search for, whether by date, approval date, created by, forwarding order number, and the results at the bottom. So we can see here, we can scroll all the way, and we have all the information related to those forwarding orders, just the same way as we have it for shopping carts. All right, if we wanted to look for a forwarding order directly, we just have to type the number here, which would be probably the easiest way. Okay. Or if we don't have enough fields here to search for, the change query option will allow us to search by different fields. So in this case, external references, organizational data, items, and so on. Probably the most interesting ones will be the ones at the bottom. If we have created by or created on, we have some more information, but basically this tab, Forwarding Order Management and Overview Forwarding Order, would be very useful if we simply just want to search for our forwarding order that we created. So I'm just going to write down the number here directly so we see what we're talking about. For a couple of these, I'm going to click on the multiple selection and add a couple of these numbers here so we can work and start seeing how these would work in TM and the documents that they generate. 406, and we have one more, 407. All right, so I'm just going to work with those three. Go down here and click on Apply, and all these documents should appear below. Now, the way TM works is each one of these documents is a hyperlink, so every time I click on one, it will load a new window that will be displaying this forwarding order document. Okay, I'm taking a look at the chat because I've seen some movement there. Okay, perfect. No questions, no problem, Maxime. I also, I know that at least I was giving everyone, the attendees, at least a 10-minute leeway because I know for you guys it's 9 in the morning. For me, it's already 3 o'clock. All right, again, I'm recording this session, so if you want to look at anything that you may think you have missed, I'll send you guys the link. By the end of the day, you can watch all the videos for the UNOE, COE, and troops before taking the assessment. By the way, also important information, the actual link to the assessment will be open until next Friday, COB, so you have the entire week next week to take the test. But again, we're only going to evaluate the first time you take the exam. So if you take it 5 times but you fail the first one is the one that counts. So I recommend you at least take a look at the recordings before, at least one of the recordings, before you take the assessment, just as a refresher. Okay, so we were looking at the forwarding order documents here. I'm going to click on maybe another one. No, actually, let's just stick to one at a time so it doesn't get that confusing, and let me maximize that screen. All right, so at the top left, what we do have here are the forwarding order numbers. So always pay attention to what you see at the top left because that will tell you what document you're viewing. Now, normally when you open one of these documents, you should be under the tab Document Flow. If you realize you have a set of tabs here at the top, let's go to the Document Flow tab first because that's the one I consider the most important. Basically because it shows you the list of documents that are linked to the one you're looking at. So in this case, we are looking at the troops forwarding order document, and the freight unit that has been generated from this forwarding order directly. So these are the two that were generated automatically. We have no freight orders yet, and that should be because the Incoterm on this one should be export, so this should be one of those non-LOA scenarios for troops. This tab basically shows you that, all the list of documents that are generated directly from the load list. Let's go all the way to the General Data tab here at the beginning. We'll take a look, and yes, I was right there. Settlement terms. We see that the Incoterm used for this one is XWorks. All the data that shows here is taken directly from that Excel that we've uploaded. Okay, so we have our basic information in the General Data tab. If you see at the bottom always, and this is because I manually organized this, I personalized the viewing of the screen to always see the items that are being transported at the bottom of my screen. That can also be changed. If we have time, we can show you that. We did that yesterday because we had a lot more time to go through it. But all the items that we're going to be transporting in this document, in the freight unit, show at the bottom. And that all depends on how you personalize your page by clicking on this icon here that has this little figurine that says personalize. Okay, if I have some time, I'll show you that as well. Then we have the Business Partner tab. Now this tab usually shows you the ordering party, shipper, and consignee. Consignee, in this case, it's the mission, and the shipper, we also have, in this case, would be the troops contributing country, so PM of Germany. Now again, remember that this would be the training environment, so if some things don't make exact sense to you, it's because the master data elements in the training environment are quite limited. But the Business Partner tab would eventually show you shipper and consignee in production as well. This would be the tab to look at to see who is the, where is this being destined to, and who is managing your goods. The location and dates, time. We have exactly that, source location, destination location, and the addresses of both. Okay, so basically these three tabs are quite important. Ordered routes, in this case, wouldn't be that important. Document flow would be something that we would like to look at every time we're looking at a document to understand which other documents are linked to it. And if you check the folder here to the right, we have a list of other tabs that we don't see directly in one swoop. We could click on probably attachments, statuses, output management, and so on, but under the forwarding order document, the most important tabs are General Data, Business Partner, Locations, and Document Flow. Now let's go back to Document Flow just to show you the freight unit. So in this case, the one ending in 924. Let me just click on the freight unit. Every time you click on a hyperlink, you have a brand new page. And this works the same way. You have a list of tabs, not all identical. Depending on what you're looking at, they will change. And the importance of each one of these tabs changes depending on what document you're looking at here at the top. For a freight unit, I recommend taking a look at the Stages tab, which we have here if we click on that folder, because it'll show you once we have generated the freight orders, every single freight order here, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, as many legs as we have in our trip from Frankfurt to our destination location here, which would be Juba Airport. Okay, so stages under freight unit is where we would want to be looking at to see and understand every single one of our stages. Now, if we want to make manual updates, once we have, let's say, created the freight PO, and now we know the actual route that our freight forwarder is going to take, we can go directly to the freight unit and make the changes here manually, okay, by clicking on Edit, and then just changing the source location, destination location, the date itself. And I'll show you how to do that once we have generated these freight orders. So basically, for the freight unit, we have, again, the General Data tab, Business Partner tab, Document Flow, three very important tabs to take a look at. Now we also have the notes and attachments, which we can look at to see if the freight forwarder or vendor has left any notes. But usually these two tabs, notes and attachments, are more worth looking at in the freight order because they're related to a particular leg in the entire process. Okay, the same thing for execution. So I would stick mainly to the Stages tab on this one. And the same thing for maybe Business Partner and Document Flow. Okay, so basically now that we've gone through some of these documents and seen the tabs and navigated just a bit through them, let's go to what I believe may be a little more interesting for you guys particularly, and also what TM was mainly created for, right? In the sense, TM is basically going to compare in the end the master data elements that we have by default based on the ones that we are going to be updating with actual rates and charges for transportation proposals, so that eventually the UN will save money on transportation. That's the main goal for using this system. So let's see how we would be doing that. Now we see this freight unit ends in 924. So what I'm going to do is close these windows here. And I'm going to go to the planning tab instead of the freight order, because I haven't created any freight orders yet. The planning tab here, and I'm going to the transportation cockpit, where I'm going to be able to see all these freight units that don't have freight orders generated yet. Let me maximize that screen and select the one related to troops, non-LOA. We also have the LOA or DAP, but there shouldn't be anything there as these are generated automatically by the system. So I select this line, click on continue, and we'll have quite a list of freight units, or we should have quite a list of freight units displayed here on the side, which we see right here. Okay, so this is the one screen called Transportation Cockpit, where we're going to be seeing all the freight units that still need transportation proposals. So they're pending for the TM planner to generate these proposals and select the better one. Next to it, to the right, we have the freight orders that haven't been generated yet, as you can see. So what we would do in this screen is select one of our freight units, or several of them, depending on if they have the same, let's say, source location, destination location, which in this case they do. All these do have that, so we could actually combine all of these together. But we would also have to look at the dates. Right? These are all the same exact date, so we can combine these together, and we can do the same for the next one here starting in June 1st. So just for a quick example, I'm selecting this first line, and I'm going to click on Transportation Proposals. These freight units, remember, are generated automatically as soon as we upload the Excel file or the text file in TM. Okay, there's nothing more in the chat. No one else has joined our session here. Okay. So we have a list of transportation proposals, if you can see here. I'm going to just make this a little bigger so we can see how many of them we have. In this case, we see the first, second, third, and we can scroll down. So in this case, we only have up to 4 transportation proposals. All right, so that's not many. And we can move through the list to the right to understand if what we want to do is filter by distance, cost, time, duration, means of transportation. So in this case, the first proposal doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the best one. We have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the last one, if you see that, we only have one means of transportation, which is air, directly Frankfurt to Juba. So basically that should be my best option. I could always just move over to the duration of the flight in this case, and also I could select if I want to take the longest or the shortest flight or duration of the trip. So in this case, we're just going to select proposal 4. And once we click on that and select our proposal, I'm going to keep moving on throughout the session. As long as you guys don't have a question, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat on one side. You guys can unmute yourselves any moment, but if I hear nothing or see nothing in the chat, I take it that everything's fine for you guys and you're following just okay. So I'm going to click on Accept Route after I selected the checkbox for proposal 4, which is just one flight from source to destination, and I'm going to accept planning. That should generate, here you go, to my right, the freight order, the one freight order here from Frankfurt to Juba for this particular freight unit that I selected. Now once I click on Save, that's going to automatically generate these freight orders, and when I go back to, let's say, take a look at this freight unit here, 911, I'm going to be able to see the freight orders generated on it that I couldn't see before. All right, so I'm going to click on Save, and once the system tells me that the data is saved successfully, we can click on the freight unit directly from this screen and see under the Document Flow tab, and I'm going to go searching for that one here. We should see the list of freight orders that are generated from it, if it worked correctly. Let me see if I can refresh this. And if not, I'll go again and try it again. Because maybe the system, just since it's the training environment, didn't work 100%. But I'm going to give it some time. Okay, so in this case, it may take a little longer than I expected. So I'm just going to leave that there for a second and explain something that is quite important in terms of freight procurement. So in TM, we wouldn't be allowed to start submitting events. Let's say once we have our freight orders, and we would generate, and the system would generate our SOW document. We wouldn't be allowed to start submitting events until we have assigned the freight PO to our freight orders. Okay, so eventually neither us as TM planners or the vendors or freight forwarders in their system called CCP would be able to submit events until we have at least assigned a freight forwarder. Now, once we assign the freight forwarder and we start submitting events, even if the freight forwarder changes throughout the process, we would have to again delete this freight forwarder that we have added and select the new one, and then again continue submitting the events for this freight order. So what's really important here is that we understand that until we do select the correct freight PO and the freight forwarder and attach it to the freight orders that we generated, we wouldn't be able to start submitting events. Now what I'm going to do here is, if this is not working fast enough, I'm going to go back to the transportation cockpit here and see if I can basically go directly to the freight order, which I have. And under this freight order, I'll go to the document flow and see if it's linked. See, so eventually it is linked to the freight unit. Let me click on the freight unit now from here and see if the freight order appears. And there it is. Okay, so it was just taking a little longer than expected. Okay, so I see another question here. Where does the information for the transportation proposals come from? Okay, so the ones that the system generated for me once and let me go back to that one. So let's say if I select this next one and just go to transportation proposals, the information that is generated by the system is just strictly based on master data. So the work of the master data team is going to have to be quite large, because all this information comes from there. And this is just master data info that will be generating these proposals by default. But as we get more proposals by the freight forwarders, we'll be updating, or the master data team will be updating this already defaulted master data with new master data, which eventually will keep giving us more and more possible proposals that the freight forwarders usually use for the transportation. Okay, so basically the short answer to the question is, and where does the master data come from, though? Okay, so in this case, where does it come from? The master data team is going to have to generate this master data manually. Where is it going to come from? I'm not exactly sure. That's beyond me, honestly. I just know that they're the ones that are going to be feeding the system with master data. Okay, Sarah? Yeah. Hopefully that was enough information there. And updating it as well with new master data. Okay, so let's go back to our, let's click out of this one. And here you go. Let's stick here. All right, so we're back to our freight unit. Again, always remember to take a look at the top here. We're back at our freight unit. We also have our freight order and our freight order at the bottom. Now let's click on this freight order so we can see exactly what we're talking about in terms of assigning the freight PO, the SOW document, and so on. So we have gone directly to the Execution tab under this freight order. Let me start with the Document Flow tab, so we're all familiar with where we are. We're starting from here. Now the freight order is the one leading all the other documents assigned to it. Under this specific one, I have managed to personalize this so that I can see that the document references are all here. This document references, I substituted that for the items so that I would always be able to see the MOU that is linked to this forwarding order, freight unit, and freight order. And now when I add the freight PO and carrier, they will show up here as well. So I can always cross-reference the information with this. Okay, General Data tab, Business Partner tab, pretty much the same as we've seen for the freight unit and the forwarding order. Stages, in this case the same as the freight unit, but in this case we're only going to see the one. Okay, for troops we're basically always going to just see one, unless of course there's more than one leg in the transportation. But what becomes important here is the Charges tab, which is going to be the one that we're going to look at. Again, the data from this is also going to be added by the master data team and updated with the actual charges every period of time. We also have the Execution tab. I'll show you now once we add the freight order how we can change these charges here. The Execution tab here is where we have the expected and unexpected events to submit. So in this case we have very few: departure, arrival, and proof of delivery. All the ones that appear here are what we consider to be expected events. The unexpected events are the ones we'll be inserting by clicking on the button Insert Event. And the notes that we add to each of the events will also be visible by the freight forwarder or vendor. Okay, so in this case we also have notes, where we're going to be using notes to pretty much communicate with freight forwarders. By adding notes here, the freight forwarder will be able to see or communicate with us from CCP. So they'll be using their system CCP, we'll be using TM, and we have a chance, since we still have quite some time, to go through both and see how that works. We can also add any of the attachments that we deem necessary under the freight order. Always better to do it through there. And if we click on the folder here where we have statuses, this tab is important as well to understand if the case of the subcontracting status, so in this case if the carrier has been assigned or not. The confirmation status is here as well, invoicing status, and so on. So we haven't yet started to submit events for this one. Now it does say here carrier assigned, which again, it's a training environment. It shouldn't be able to say this because I haven't assigned any carrier to it yet. But again, it was kind of glitching before, so maybe it's just not working 100% well, the training environment today. But the tabs are still the ones that you're going to be looking at in the production. So we have status, and finally the output management tab, which is the one where we're going to be taking a look at the SOW document. By selecting the row here and going to document preview, we should have our document load right below. And this is the one we could be saving. Again, the buyer's reference. So we have the MOU number here and all the freight orders that are linked to that MOU. So there must be more than one linked. We have here the ones ending in 714, 724, 725. So all the transportation orders or freight orders linked to this MOU will be attached to this document. And we can simply just save this one. Save a copy of this one, and we can attach it later on. This is the copy that we'll be using to request the freight PO in a non-LOA scenario. And basically where we would be getting it from, again, just a quick reminder, the Output Management tab, just by selecting the actual line and the document preview. Okay, no questions there. All right, so basically we'll get our SOW document from here and attach that to our freight shopping cart. And once we get our actual rates, charges, and let's say the real transportation proposal, what we would do is come back into TM and make the necessary changes. Okay, and this is where we come to this part on our presentation. So just quickly, we saw the Excel here. We saw how to upload the Excel, the documents that are generated from the Excel, the forwarding order and the freight unit. We saw more than how the system generated them automatically. We went directly to doing it ourselves by selecting best proposals, seeing how the system calculated the charge estimate. And now the last thing we saw was how we generated, or let's say clicked on the document, the freight order document, to view the SOW. Okay, so this is the SOW we're now going to be using to raise the freight shopping cart. So now we're moving on to this column here, procurement freight. We're going to be skipping the entire process of the shopping cart. You're well aware of that one. And we're going to go directly to the TM section here, which is to assign a carrier NPO to freight order and also edit the charges. All right, so basically let's go back to TM and do that one. We can close these windows here. Actually, it would be nice, I'm just going to take note of that MOU so that when I start assigning, we can do it from even the document flow. Because now once I start looking for the freight order that I want to assign it to, I want to see if I can just copy this quickly. So when I look for the freight orders, I have to use this MOU document. And let's go and do that. So let me close all these windows and go directly to the transportation, to the overview tab that we haven't taken a look at yet. So we saw this forwarding order management tab, the planning tab, and now we're going to the freight order management tab here. Okay, clicking on overview freight orders. And now here's where we're going to be searching for, if it was a UN-owned equipment scenario, the goods purchase order or the inbound delivery document, so that we could link all the freight orders that belong to one single inbound delivery document or purchase order and assign the freight PO. In this case, what we're going to be doing is the same thing, but now only looking for the MOU. So we're going to click here, and let me just do that again quickly. First, overview freight orders, then next. We have quite a number of details here below, and then the results at the bottom. But I want you to see how it works if we go to change query and the amount. It all gets divided into subsections. If we scroll all the way to the bottom, we can see that we have for the UNOE section here, the goods PO and inbound delivery document. And if we can add the forwarding order number here or the MOU reference number here. Now, I'm going to try to write the entire reference that I took note of before here. Okay, in this case, you could just copy and paste it, but I wasn't able to copy it. So let's see if just by writing this here, okay, I didn't think so. Maybe I made a mistake in one of the letters. All right, so we can go the easy way and just write the forwarding order number, because it has to be exact when you write the MOU reference number here. Okay, so let's see if we just add a forwarding order number. See if the system can find this forwarding order number. Okay, I'm not getting lucky with the forwarding order numbers here. You see the ones that I've created today, and that's it, instead of looking for the numbers. Okay, so something seems to be happening with the system today. It doesn't let me write anything else there, so I'm going to just click on apply. All right, so we have quite a number of freight orders that we still have here to assign, because I've been playing around with the system a lot these past few days. To understand which ones we want to link, if we move all the way to the right, is where we'll have information that links our documents in TM to any other documents, for example, the forwarding orders that we're talking about before, that we can start filtering from there. Also the MOU reference numbers, If we want here as well, these are the ones. So basically I could just stick to the first one here at the top, just to show you how it would be done. So let's say we have the one freight order number here that is linked to my MOU reference number, and I want to assign a carrier to it now that the freight PO has been approved. If you guys take a look at the carrier description column here, some of them have a carrier description already, but the majority of them say dummy. So in the system in TM, if there is no carrier assigned yet, it will always be displayed as dummy carrier. That's how you know that we haven't assigned a freight PO to it yet. Okay, so this first one also needs a freight forwarder, sorry. Okay, so we select the line. Basically, we can do it from here just as easy as going to, if I can see it here, set status, create, just put this cockpit scheduling. So in this case, this one is different, unless I have already created it here. So this system today is not working as the past few days. There you go, subcontracting, here we go, and assign carrier and SRM freight PO. So basically I select the line, go to subcontracting, and select the last option here, assign carrier and SRM freight PO. Now when I do that, a new window loads and lets me add the actual carrier and freight PO number here. So I can assign this like this, the way I'm doing it now. I can also go into the freight unit document for this freight order and do that manually under the stages section. But this would be the easiest way to do so. Let's say if instead of just one freight order as we have here, we had to link 3 or 4 freight orders to the same freight forwarder, this would be the best way to do it. We would select them all, click on subcontracting, and then assigning the carrier and the freight PO here. So let's add the carrier information, and before I do that, I'm taking a look at the chat quickly, so nothing there. Okay, no questions so far, and let me add the carrier. So I've been adding the same carrier throughout the week, which is Kuehne+Nagel here, and I'm just going to do that this time now as well. So let me just look for the number quickly. And here you go. All right, and we would select our carrier. We can also go to the Matchbox and perform our search by business partner, first name, last name, and so on. But since I know the number and for the sake of time, I've just added here. And at the bottom is where I would add my freight PO number. Okay, so in this case, since TM and SRM are not, let's say, integrated with each other, we can add any number we would like in this case. So it can just be any number we would like, and the system should accept it. Okay, in a real life scenario, you would be adding the correct number, of course. And now we have that number assigned. All I would have to do is click on this freight order number, and now if I take a look at the tab here where I could see the business partner, remember the business partner will show us the carrier that has been assigned. So you see where it said dummy before, now it says Kuehne+Nagel. So the carrier has been assigned there as well. Okay, additions can be made here as well under business partner. If I click on edit, okay, we can do this manually as well for each one of the freight orders. So again, remember, you can do it manually for each freight order by accessing each individual freight order and adding the carrier manually, or you can do so the way I just did, which would be the fastest way if you have to assign the same freight forwarder to all freight orders. Okay, let's cancel that. So in this case, our carrier has been assigned already. As I was telling you guys at the beginning of the session, that document references column, section, sorry, that I have at the bottom, now will display my freight PO number as well. So I can always reference the MOU with the freight PO number at the bottom. Okay, and have all the information I need in terms of carrier, consignee, and shipper. All right, so basically that's the way we would assign a carrier to a freight order after we go through the process in SRM. And once it's assigned, we can go to charges and make any changes in the charges if we had to. So in this case, particularly, we wouldn't have any defaulted master data, so the charges haven't changed there. But if we go to the section here where we have, see these estimated charges, we should already have some sort of master data there. And the same thing happens for the actual charges. This is where we would go if we want to make any changes in the actual charges. So we would click on Edit. And under the actual charges for each one of the lines, so we could make the differences and make any additions to any of the charges that have changed, let's say, now that we have a freight forwarder. Okay, so basically to make the changes in the charges tab under the freight order would be the place to go. We'd click on Edit and navigate to the actual charges lines. Sorry. All right, click on Cancel. Now I know this is a lot of information for an 1.5-hour session, but that's why we had 3 different sessions where we repeated this process quite a few times. Let's see what else we have here. If we wanted to make any changes to the dates, as the actual PowerPoint presentation showed at the bottom here, it says that we can edit the freight order with dates and charges and routes. So let's go back to our freight order. We can do that under the Stages tab, where we have our leg, our specific one leg for our freight order. So under that Stages tab, the same, we could go to Edit and make any changes to our destination location as well as our source location. So you see we can make the changes directly in our freight order, or we could go to our freight unit if, let's say, we had more than one leg, and make all the changes from the freight unit document itself. All right, so charges in the Charges tab, Stages, meaning the source, destination, location, and even the dates for the planned departure could be changed here manually. The notes, as we were discussing, we still have 15 minutes, so I could play around with the notes a little bit for this one freight order ending in, so let's say 27735. Okay, I'm just taking note of that number. So when I go to CCP, I can play around with the submission of events. Okay, we can insert comments here on the notes, the type of text that we can select, additional item information, the language, if we want this to be just internal text or external text. If we're communicating with the freight forwarder, we would leave this unchecked, and the content of our notes would be added here. All right, so we would add this as a test, and now once we save this, we would see that it is created by, and the user for the TM Planner user would show up here. When it's done by the freight forwarder, you'll see that the message or note was created here by Kuehne+Nagel instead of by the TM Planner. So I'll click on Save so that this note stays. We can add another note by clicking on Insert, or we can delete the note by clicking on the bin. So this is quite simple. The Attachments tab works very easily as well. We can just insert by clicking on this button here, or drop the files directly in the big square. So if we insert, let's go to File. The attachment, we can say if it's a legal document, a link, or a rate table. We can make a description of this. So let's say test in this case. Click on Next, and browse and add that document that we would want to add, whether it's a PDF, an Excel, or any other type of document. I saved an SOW yesterday here in PDF format, so that's the one I'll be adding. I'll click on OK. And once it's there, I can also make amendments to, if the visibility is internal. Of course, I want to make the change and make it external because I want the freight forwarder to see it. I can still change the type of attachment, and I can move on here to see what type of document we're looking at, and click on Save. And our document is now saved here under Attachments. All right, so basically we've seen all the tabs that are important here in the freight order. Last but not least would be also taking a look at the execution tab just before we move on to CCP. Okay, so execution tab shows us the events. These are all planned events. If they're not planned or unexpected, you'd have to insert them. But none of these have been yet submitted. As we can see here, the status is still in yellow. So let's see, I'm going to submit the first event, and then we're going to go to CCP and see how that is reflected in CCP. Then I'm going to submit an event from CCP and see how that is reflected in TM. And that would be some of the last things we're going to be doing in this WebEx session. Okay, so if you have any questions, and now would be the time to ask them while I log into CCP. Yeah, I'm just going to submit this first event here. So the first one, I would just select the event and click on report. This would mean that the event has now been submitted. Reported event. Okay, I would just save. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't assigned the freight forwarder beforehand. Okay, so remember, it's important to remember that neither the TM planner nor the freight forwarder can submit an event before we have assigned the freight PO, the freight forwarder, sorry. Okay, we have a question here. Thanks, Sarah. Can you explain the difference between the freight order numbers beginning with 6.1 and the forwarding order numbers beginning with 2.1 and the freight unit numbers beginning with 4.1? Okay, sure. All right, so the reason why they begin with those numbers, not really, but the difference mainly is that the freight units and the forwarding order numbers are documents that are generated automatically in TM as soon as we have uploaded our Excel sheet, the one that we were looking at the beginning of the session. That's why I spent a little bit of time on it. So once we generate the text file and upload it to TM, that text file generates the forwarding order document and at the same time the freight unit, right, which is all the items in that document in one single freight unit. So everything that we're going to be transporting together. So those two are generated simultaneously and automatically in TM. Now, the freight order is what represents the legs in our transportation proposal that we're selecting. So what we would do is select our freight unit in the transportation cockpit, and based on that freight unit, which will display the items that are being transported, it also displays the source location, destination location. We would select that. And now the system would offer us a number of stages, right? Transportation proposals based on stages. These stages are the same exact thing as freight orders, which are the same exact thing as legs. Okay, so this could have like 3 different names at once. Stages, legs, and freight orders. And every one of those freight orders represents a different leg. So in this case, since we're only talking about one flight, I only selected a proposal with one flight, departure and arrival. All we have is one single freight order. But for cases like UN-owned equipment or contingency-owned equipment, you could have 4, 5, even 6 different freight orders, depending on how many stops you have. So the main difference between the 3 documents is that, okay, 2 are generated automatically, forwarding order and freight unit in the TM system. The freight unit is the one we're going to be using to generate transportation proposals, and the ones we select, the proposals we select, will be the freight orders, which will represent the legs that the transportation proposal we selected shows. Now, the freight orders are the ones we're going to be working on from now on. Once we have accepted those transportation proposals, we're only going to be working on the freight orders and submitting events for those freight orders, assigning freight POs to those freight orders, editing any of the source location, destination location. So any changes that may occur during the transition from point A to point B will be reflected in the freight order. So we wouldn't even have to edit the forwarding order or the freight unit any longer once we have generated the freight orders. Hopefully that explains majorly the difference between the 2 documents, or the 3 documents in this case. If we're talking about UN-owned equipment, instead of a forwarding order, remember it's a DTR document. Okay, it's the same exact thing. It's the document that would be like a mirror document of an inbound delivery document in TM, but that's the one that TM generates automatically. Okay, clear on the freight order, but less clear on the other two. Okay. Yeah, basically, just the forwarding order basically is just a document reference in TM of the things that either a PO that we have approved in SRM or an Excel that we have uploaded. And the freight unit is automatically generated based on the data that we've uploaded to TM. It's basically the one we're going to be using to generate the transportation proposals. There's really not much more to those. All right, so let me just move on with the submission of events here. And if any other questions come up, I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat. All right, so again, I took note of this number, and now what I'm going to be doing is logging into CCP. And I should be doing so as Kuehne+Nagel here because that's who I assigned this to. So let's see if by any chance it's that number. If not, it should end in 5. Okay, so that's the case. CP. All right, so this is the Carrier Collaboration Portal, or CCP, where the freight forwarders and vendors would log in to submit events that we will also see in TM for each one of those freight orders. So every time they log in, they would have a list or a number of freight orders that are still pending for submission. In this case, we have 11. Click on that, and our list would look like the following, where all our freight orders would show. Okay, mine is the one at the top, the one I just assigned maybe 5 minutes ago. So the first one here at the top. We can always scroll to the right and see what is linked to it in terms of MOU reference number or freight PO number here as well. So based on either if it's UN-owned equipment that we're talking about or contingency-owned equipment or troops, this is where we would find the linkage. And let's scroll back to the left and select our freight order so we see. Now, once I select it and go into the system, I should already see one event submitted, okay, and that's already there. Our first event, departure, already shows us a check mark here, and it says that this event was submitted on May 24th at 4:16. So that's the one I did in TM. I should also be able to see notes added. So in this case, I can see a note here saying this is a test submitted at 4:13. And I should also be able to see an attachment, which is the SOW attachment here. So that all worked. Okay, so we can do the same the other way around. All right, so now I'm going to do so from the CCP Carrier Collaboration Portal. I'm going to write notes here. All right, so we can add that note here as well. And I'm also going to submit another event till the arrival at destination. Again, since it's the training environment, I should be able to do pretty much anything I want in this case. All right, so we have that information here. I can update the events at the bottom, and now I should have a green check mark on that one. Let's see if I can update this event, or maybe I just forgot to add some stuff here. Okay, so actions are fine. This event should be okay, but it still doesn't show status complete because I still have one more. The notes that I added here for thank you, and I could even add another PDF document as well from here if I wanted to. Let's add this one here again. So now we'll have 2 SOW documents. Once it shows here, I can upload, add new. Okay, and we have 2 PDF files here. I can always update event. And now I'll move back to TM so we see how that has been reflected there. All right, nothing else to do here. All right, I added the note. So we have thank you, this is a test. So again, we click on the add note button to make sure that it goes through, and we update the event to make sure that the event has gone through and the upload of the PDF is there as well. So since this is done, we can just close here, go back to the freight order here, 6135, refresh it, and now we should have either another event submitted. By any chance, it doesn't seem like it's done this one, so I'm going to go back and see what happened there. But let me go see for the notes and the attachments if that has gone through. Okay, so for notes, it went through. The thank you, yes. And the attachment, now we have 2 documents. So that worked just fine. And in the execution, there may still be one step to do, which is probably submit the second event here. Okay, so basically that's the way this works. Let's see if we can complete this. I'm going to check the chat. So nothing more. Now would be a good time to ask any questions. If you guys want me to review something, particularly go over something. I know that the document names, the forwarding order, freight unit, and freight orders could be a bit confusing the very first time you start working with them. It happened to us in our first trainings as well, especially because a lot of the times they're the same names for different things, or you guys are used to using other names. Let's see if I can add this here. Maybe it's because I'm using the same exact date, so maybe that won't be the greatest example. All right, and I'll do the same thing here. So it won't let me submit the ones because it hasn't happened yet. Okay, so basically we saw how one system works with the other and how they communicate and how we can see the events in TM. And we logged in. We had enough time to go through everything I wanted to look at in this PowerPoint presentation. So a lot of information for an hour and a half, but I think enough to get the basic idea. All right, let me see. Sarah, you have another question here. Okay, so a great question. All right, question on what it is exactly we do, right? So understanding is that procurement's role is to do 4 things: insert actual cost, insert dates, insert carrier, and insert purchase order number. Can you please confirm that is correct? Okay, so yeah, in a nutshell, that is correct. So if we're looking at this PowerPoint here, your mission here would be what is shown at the bottom here. So basically, to assign the carrier and PO to the freight order, edit FO with the charges. So that's basically the job, okay, according to what is expected of you. Of course, everything before that as well, but in TM, this is what is expected. But now there could be chances where there's a submission of event, but that would require you to have the TM planner role. In your case, I think you only have the TM FO manager role. So basically, yes, your duties are summarized to these: assign carrier, freight PO to the freight order, and edit dates, charges, and locations. Okay, in terms of troops, rotations, repatriations, okay, very good. Yes. So basically, yes. All right, but now I hope you have a full understanding or a better understanding of how TM would work. Okay, I heard a beep in the background there. I'm not sure if somebody was trying to speak up or not. Usually when there's a beep in a WebEx, somebody raised their hand to speak up. Oh, yes. So, you will wish to speak up, so I unmuted you. Tell me, Sal. You're unmuted, Sal. Unless you rather, okay, I see you wrote in the chat as well. I understand that there will be one FO for each leg flight. However, there might be less flights when we actually contract. Okay, no mic. All right, so yeah, so there is one FO, one freight order per leg, yes. There might be less flights when we actually contract. Less than one flight? I'm not sure I understand the second part of the sentence, but yes, for the first one, there will be one freight order for each leg. So if you have 10 legs, you have 10 freight orders. And then the second part of the question with the there might be less flights when we actually contract. Not sure. If you could develop more on that. Exactly, yes. The freight orders are created when planned, exactly. So the way we did it, that we went to the transportation cockpit, right? That was, we were selecting the freight units. I think here, if we close it, yeah, you select, we have a list of transportation proposals. You select the best one, and depending on the one you select, you'll have either one freight order or 10 freight orders, depending on the legs on the transportation proposal you select. And once you select them and click on Save, the system will generate the freight orders. These freight orders will each have the SOW document linked to it, and this SOW document will have in it all the details related to the items, MOU reference number, and all other freight orders that are part of this transportation proposal as well. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Any other question? Okay, we get the requirements from our requisitioners. They give us a range of the number of flights. Exactly. Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, yes, in terms of the Excel, if I go back to the Excel that we had here, this portion here exactly, right? This portion here would be given to you. This is what you're saying in the question. So they would be letting you know the amount of chalks, troops, flights, and everything would be already given to you, I suppose. I'm not sure how it works from your side, so it's good that you give me this information. Yeah, and basically if, all right, so I'm not sure if you're in freight procurement. I've seen you in all 3 sessions, so I'm not sure if it's freight procurement or something else that you're working with, but in the, for troops, okay, perfect, 200 bucks for this requirement. Yes, so in this case, if we have troops here, 200, and this would mean chalks 2 flights. Exactly, 2 flights. Okay, so if you contract a carrier that does it in 1 flight, and the 200 fit in there, then we would just, in this case, the chalks would just be 1. And just 1 flight. Okay, I see. So let's say if anything you do in TM, let's say you already generated the freight orders, you generated 2 freight orders because initially you selected the transportation proposal with 2 flights, and I think that's where I'm understanding the question here. You could always just go back and delete those freight orders and then just generate a new transportation proposal with just 1 flight. If, let's say, and this would be one of those scenarios where we could get to the system, based on its master data, is only offering you the possibility to select a transportation proposal with 2 flights and not just 1 flight, then yes, we only have to update the events for the 1 freight order. We could do it all in just 1 freight order and update the events of 1 freight order. Also explaining in the notes that we're just using that 1 freight order for that and cancel out the other one. So yeah, I think I understood the full question there. Anything you do in TM, it can be changed. Okay, before you assign the freight PO to the freight orders, you can make any changes you want. Even after you've assigned the freight PO to the freight order, you can still make changes and cancel. Okay, you normally receive a range of acceptable flight number of flights in your SOW. All right, exactly. Yeah, I know that a lot of the times the process, based on what I understood when I was in New York from people working in freight procurement and goods procurement and so on, the way that you usually do things day to day, a lot of the work is given to you in the sense of the requirements, and all you do is process these requirements. And excuse me if I'm being a little too simple there, but what surprised a lot of people is the amount of extra work that TM requires from their part in terms of planning all these now new transportation proposals, submitting events, and so on. Basically, the major thing here would be just from your side to assign the freight PO and to make the changes in the updates. Now, these things may even change in the future once SRM and TM are integrated, so all the changes that could be made directly in SRM, once you've had the PO, the freight PO approved, the changes could automatically be added to TM, which you would have to not even worry about updating these events. But so far for phase one, this is the way it was done, and this is the way we taught it. So I'm just teaching you exactly the same thing we taught everyone else in phase one. Now for phase two, if things change, we can have an update on that. Okay, so thank you guys for joining the session. If there's anything else, I'm still here. Any other questions, you guys can always reach out to me at the email I send. I'm going to send an email shortly after we finish this session with the link to the assessment and a survey. If you guys could just take a minute of your time to also answer the survey. You have until next Friday to finish the test. I think it's very easy. I think you'll have no problem with it, but I recommend you take it. And I doubt that you'll fail it. If there are any questions, just get back to me in that same email that I used to contact you guys, and I'll be there available next week. All right, so thank you all, and enjoy your Friday.